Me and see me now. Sorry, I'm still learning all of this technology. Um, hey, hey, Aid Crusaders. Welcome to College Aid Night at noon, and this is presented by College Aid Works. My name is Stephanie Hancock. I'm the founder and owner of College Aid Works, and I designed this show to try to be useful to families to help lead them to affordable college options for their students. Um, what the heck is EEAAO? All right, that's a movie reference. And the movie was called a couple years ago, I think it won an Oscar. It's called Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And that movie was wild, to say the least. Um, it's not just a movie. I think it's also a description of how a lot of us feel as we go through the college aid and admissions process with our seniors. I think the movie is about a relationship between a mother and a daughter. I think I've watched it twice. I'm still not 100% sure if that was what it was about. If I tried to describe this movie to you, there's no way I could ruin it for you because it's not linear, right? So I wasn't sure what was going on the whole time. I just went with it. And by the end, I was happy that I had seen it to the end. So why am I telling you this? I'm mentioning it because senior year admissions financial aid feels like everything everywhere all at once. Stuff's coming at you from every direction. You can't get your bearings. You don't know what's going on. And at a certain point, you just got to go with it. And that's what I hope I'm here to help you do. Now, I know the senior year version of everything everywhere all at once because I've lived it as a parent, but more importantly, as a professional, I've also helped people and I get it. I know the Godfather movies or Tombstone. I can quote them from memory, right? And I do quite a bit. I can also quote the college version of Everything Everywhere All at Once. But I don't ask me about the movie because I don't really know exactly. There's rocks talking, there's like people coming out of the sky. I have no idea. And I still could never ruin that movie for you because I didn't understand it enough. So think about it. This is what we're all feeling. And I'm just going to try to allay some of that feeling you may have and to be like a movie commentator, giving you some color commentary as we go through this process. Now, I always like to start with wins. What's important now? And last month, I talked about what was important for each grade, ninth graders, 10th graders, 11th graders. Okay. Ninth and 10th, it's pretty much the same. It's going to stay the same until you move into upperclassmen level. So you just want to figure out, are you going to qualify? Is it likely? Find out sooner than later so you're not disappointed like a deer in the headlights when it's senior year, right? And then what can you do to fix it? For 11th grade families, there's still time. You have until the end of 2024 to try to adjust things if it's possible to do things a little better in order to enhance your ability to qualify for need-based aid. But this is really going to be more about seniors. What are senior families needing to do? Well, number one, I wouldn't be surprised if it's already been done, but finalizing the list. But my recommendation, again, is always finalize the list based on what you can afford. So you've picked great schools. Don't leave it to chance. Will we, won't we qualify? Don't go in hoping for the best. You need to try to nail down reality. because it'll be over. Look, we're almost at Thanksgiving break. Winter break will be here, and then boom, the spring semester is going to fly by. So what's important now? I keep repeating the same things to people because I don't know if I'm not speaking a language they understand. I don't know if they just don't want to hear it, or if they're just keeping their head in the sand because they're so overwhelmed. But these are super important tasks that you need to complete. The very first one after figuring out your student aid index numbers is get your FSA IDs, right? You need to set up FSA accounts. When you set up your FSA account, you're going to create a federal state aid ID, username, and password. And that is what is going to allow you to, number one, sign in and submit the FAFSA form. And we know we have to submit the FAFSA form if we want to be considered for need-based aid, or if we want to access student loans or parent loans. You're going to do that at studentaid.gov. And the question is, who needs this? Who needs it? It's the student, because your student is the one applying for need-based aid, not the parent. The student is applying to go to school. The student is applying for aid, for help. So the student always has to have an FSA ID username and FSA account. Parents also need to create an account, but who's your parent? There's a really good site. I've put the link in the chat. There's a site that tells you who's a parent. And I'm mentioning this because people sometimes are thinking that they're responsible for doing it, and they're not. And then other people don't realize that maybe one or both parents needs to have that FSA ID, username, and password. So I am the biological mother of my child, and I am the custodian, right? I provide the majority of support. I need an FSA ID, username, and password. And they're not hard to create. If you can create a Gmail, if you can create a Amazon, you can create an FSA ID username and password. You can create a studentaid.gov account. If I am married, whether it's to my child's biological parent or I'm remarried, that second person may or may not need to create an account as well. What determines that is if we file a joint tax return or not. So I'm married, we file a joint tax return, only one parent needs to create a studentaid.gov account. I'm divorced, it's just me, only I need to create that. I'm remarried, and we are the custodial parents for the student for the purpose of financial aid, and we file separate tax returns. Each one of us, the parent and the step parent, need studentaid.gov accounts. Why? Because the studentaid.gov account is your electronic signature when the FAFSA is being submitted. So you're giving permission on the form to share tax information. You're telling the IRS it's okay to share my tax information with the Department of Education. And when you want to do that, you have to be a signer on the tax return. If I don't file a joint tax return with my spouse, I can't give permission to share his information on the FAFSA form, right? That person, he has to do that. I have to do it for myself. The student has to do it for him or herself. Now, do this now. The form is going to be available December 1st. I'm not trying to do a form December 1st. I'm going to let everybody flock, see what happens, and I'm going to wait a bit. But get the student aid account set up right now. No, it can't wait. Some of you are going, oh, I don't want to do this. It's a pain. I'm overwhelmed. Too bad. Too bad, so sad, right? As they said in Van Helsing. Just get this done. All you have to do you know your name? Do you know your date of birth? Do you know your social security number? Okay, so far so good. Do you know your address? Okay, that's pretty much, and your phone number, your cell phone or something, and you know your email. That's pretty much it. So don't dread this, because there's other stuff that's much more difficult to do. So get this done now. And the reason I tell you this is because you never know what's going to happen. LFO, learn from others. Some guy, Ken Schramm, he said, wise people learn from other people's mistakes. And so I'm telling you, we get cases all the time. Recently, we had a student trying to set up the studentaid.gov account. And guess what? It said her social was already in use. That's not a quick fix necessarily. That means you got to call the Federal Student Aid Department, right? When they open at 8 a.m. Eastern, and sit on hold and see what can be worked out. Last year, a lot of people that had families that had mixed immigration status, so maybe the parents were not citizens, however, the student is or was. People that weren't here, that didn't have legal status, for example, they had difficulty getting recognized by the system. And it was a lot of heartache because deadlines were quickly approaching and they didn't have enough time. So learn from other people, LFO, get it done and just knock that one thing off. I like when I have a list and I get to check something off. It gives me, like a small, very small rush, but I like it, right? Come on, you can do that. The next one, check the deadlines for the financial aid forms. And last month, I said to you guys, early action and early decision means early financial aid deadlines. And that's another LFO, learn from other people. People will call the office to talk to us about helping them with the CSS profile or the process. And one of the most common questions we ask is, when is your stuff due? And people think, oh, well, the FAFSA is not out till December 1st, so I'm good because it's November. Well, no, you're not, because a lot of early action and early decision schools require that second form, the CSS profile form, and they want it early. So if I'm applying early decision to, I don't know, Stanford, Tulane, Wesleyan, University of Chicago, hey, guess what? They wanted that form November 1st or November 15th, tomorrow. Yikes, right? So sometimes when we talk to people, you can just hear like the air coming out of their tires because they think, oh, I'm getting ahead of this. The form isn't available until December 1st, when in actuality, they're behind the 8 ball and they don't realize it. So I'm letting you know right now, if you have early decision or early action on the college list today, you want to be checking the deadlines because you don't want to get caught out. What happens typically is if you miss the deadline is when the student gets accepted, right, on the positive note, in December, there's no financial aid offer coming with that acceptance. So now you've applied early decision and the financial aid office isn't telling you what they can do for you. It's not as big a deal, right, if it's early action, because you have until May to commit and you can get your stuff in and you'll see. But other schools are really hardcore about this. If you don't meet their deadlines, you're not getting any money. So make sure that you just Google financial aid, ABC University, crisscross all through the website till you get to some deadlines and a list of items that the school wants, because it may not just be that form that they want. They may want additional items. Okay. And don't forget the non-custodial parent, because some of these schools, the deadline is tomorrow. It's not just tomorrow for the custodial parent. If there's a non-custodial parent in the picture that you need to also have do the forms, just remember, everybody's not on our timeline. So we want to give people ample time to get stuff done. All right. Okay. So those are the most important things. One other thing I do want to say about that is, who's your parent? Your parent is your biological parent. It's your step parent. Your parent is not a grandparent if the student lives with a grandparent. Grandparents raising their grandchild, this is fantastic and to be grateful for, but they are not the parent on a financial aid form. All right. If you've got a guardian, a legal guardian, that person is not your parent. The only time a grandparent or a legal guardian could be on the financial aid forms is if they have actually changed their status by adopting a student. If you haven't adopted them, you don't have to report your pension, your Social Security benefits. You don't have to tell them about your IRA, your 401k. You don't have to tell them anything, because you are not filling out the form, right? Ideally, if you can get the parent to fill it out, that's the way to go. But if not, then what you're going to do is fill out the form, and you'll see next month as I do walkthroughs, there are sections where you can explain, hey, I've got a special circumstance. I'm actually not living with my parents. I don't have contact with them, whatever the case is. And those are going to be treated on a case-by-case basis. Okay, so that's really important. And I've got a link in the chat that you can click, and that link will take you to a nice little infographic that tells you who's your parent, who isn't your parent, and who needs a studentaid.gov ID, right, account. Right. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about, this section's about being in search of affordable college. And why I'm talking about this is because we all want a school that's, affordable, of course, but there are different trends and things are happening. So one trend is, I see when I first started in this business, I saw lots of kids were into like NYU or University of Michigan, or there was one other one I can't think of. It might have been BU, right? And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. These keep showing up. And what I see as I've worked in this for so many years is some school wax and wane in popularity. Lots of kids love what I call a good rah-rah school. And rah-rah means, we got football, we got tailgating, we're going to bowl games, that whole vibe on the campus. We got basketball, we got other sports, but usually when I think rah-rah, I think football. So getting money and getting that from rah-rah schools is going to be different. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Now, the usual suspects of rah-rah schools. So there's always, I see Wisconsin, I see Michigan, I see UCLA, University of Alabama, Tennessee, all of these rah-rah schools. And they're usually like the big public schools. There's some private rah-rah, like Notre Dame. That's a rah-rah school to me. But I'm talking about the state schools that are Big Ten, SEC football, typically. Okay, so there was an article in the Wall Street Journal back in September, and the article was called "Sorry, Harvard, Everyone Wants to Go to College in the South Now." And I thought that kind of piqued my interest because I like to see what kids are thinking, because money is going to increase or decrease, or money increases and kids follow, or prices decrease and kids follow. So they and the parent can get what they want. So what they noted is that there's a trend for students from the Northeast to go to the South now. And this is enrollment up 30% between 2018 and 2022. And the most common states that students from the Northeast tend to go to are Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, Arkansas, Louisiana, Georgia, and then California, Indiana, and Wisconsin also tend to be popular. So I'm thinking, why, how's that working? And what we're finding is, number one, they can get rah-rah for less, right? So the cost of living in New York or Northeast tends to be higher, the income's higher, and schools may or may not be more, but maybe their schools aren't. I don't think there's a New York, state school that's a rah-rah school. I could be wrong, but I'm just not familiar with it. A lot of states like UConn is known for basketball, but I don't think they're that big on football. I'd have to ask. A lot of those schools, Syracuse, rah-rah, but private and very expensive. So what kids are seeing is they can go down to the South and the colleges are less expensive. Some of them are giving merit money to really qualified students. They can have a different vibe that they're living in. And, the lower cost of living post-grad is also an attraction, because apparently 2/3 of kids, when they graduate from college, stay in that area after graduating. So it's a place where cost of living relative to the Northeast, where they're coming from, is way more affordable. So there's a lot of reasons why this is happening. Okay, so what's the point of it? The point is, when some of these schools are going to be more generous with money than others. And it says applications at like University of Alabama was up 600%. That's crazy. That's really crazy. And one thing I know just off the top of my head is Alabama's been consciously trying to attract students from outside of Alabama. I think they want some, diversity, like geographic diversity, maybe diversity of thought. I'm not sure. But Alabama, if you have like a 3.5 GPA and you get a certain test on your ACT or SAT, you're automatically eligible to get some money. So it's a way to get a less expensive school even cheaper. I look at University of Florida or Florida State. The cost of attendance, if you're a resident, is like nothing. It's really inexpensive. I think out-of-state student is maybe $40,000 a year, all in tuition, room and board, books, transportation, and pocket money. You have to double check my numbers because I didn't have time to review them. But these trends, as students flock toward different schools, it starts to create a chain reaction in terms of how much money is going to be thrown at kids. Next month or January, I'm going to talk about another trend, and that's the trend of fewer students graduating from high school going forward. There's like this dip, which means colleges, many colleges are going to be competing for the same students, only there's less of them. And some schools will be immune to that, having to change their funding or their aid policies, but other schools are going to probably have to become more aggressive in how much money they give. So just be aware that that's a trend. And if you see certain schools, don't think it's going to be cheaper, but only, I guess, if you're the one who's going to foot the bill. Because as I talk about affordability spotlight, these rah-rah schools are not going to be a good fit for everyone. If I'm an in-state student, if I'm in South Carolina and I want to go to University of South Carolina and I'm a good student and I need financial aid, it's probably going to be a good fit, an okay fit for me, because I'm eligible for if I'm eligible for federal financial aid, right? I'm getting that. If I'm eligible for state aid, then I'd be getting that. And then the university oftentimes has money that they can kick in to help as well. What I have to be concerned about is the gap between what they think I need and what they're actually able to do for me in terms of helping me come to campus. It's different if I'm a non-resident, because number one, many of these schools are tacking on out-of-state tuition, but they also are not going to meet as much need. So when you see statistics, I looked up and I think it was Wisconsin, and it said something like on average, they meet 89 or 81% of a student's need. Non-resident student families, they're not talking about you. They're talking about residents, right? For non-residents, you're going to be eligible for federal aid because that's covering the whole country. You're not eligible for state aid unless you live in one of the neighboring states and there's some kind of reciprocity going on. And then it's questionable whether you're going to get the school's own money, because a lot of that tends to be funded through state coffers. So if I'm a student and I have a lot of need, I qualify for a Pell Grant, which is because my income is low or low middle income. These rah-rah schools out of state are usually not going to be a good fit for you, because I'm not just going to have a little gap that I need to mind. I'm going to have a big, significant chunk that isn't going to be accounted for. Some schools, I already mentioned a school like Alabama, you can get merit money. And at those schools, that may help shore up or reduce my cost, because maybe it's just offsetting the out-of-state tuition portion surcharge, or it might actually, reduce my cost more than that. So those are the kinds of things that you would be thinking about if you have a student who's considering, they live in Connecticut and they want to go to University of Alabama. That might work out because my student got a great test score and Alabama is going to give them half tuition or 3/4 or all the tuition off as a scholarship. But my kid's not that kid. My kid's got a great GPA, but they're not a good test taker, and we're not eligible for any merit money. Then I may have to question if my budget allows. And that's why it's so important at the start, figure out what you can afford to pay so that you can make good decisions when crunch time comes. Okay, so I'm going to try to see, it doesn't look like there's any questions right now. So what I'll do is I'm just going to switch to what I'm going to talk about, what's going to happen next month when I do the College Aid Night at noon. I'm going to do FAFSA walkthroughs. College Aid Night at noon next month is going to be, as it usually is, the second Thursday of December. However, I'm thinking I might move it. That means it would be December 12th. I may move it to December 5th so that it's sooner after the form's been submitted. But whether it's the first or second Thursday, I'm going to do FAFSA walkthroughs, and you can watch and see how these questions are being asked. And I'll say why it's being answered the way that it is. And I'll try to do 2 run-throughs, one for families that are where the custodial parent is married to the biological parent, the second parent, or remarried. And then one if you're divorced, separated, never married, and not living with the student's biological parent, other biological parent. So that's what I'll do. I'll be talking about the common data set if we have time, because statistics that I've been talking about here, you can get them from the common data set, but you need to know how to read it. And then I doubt there's going to be additional time for me to talk after I've gone through 2 FAFSAs for sure, and if I get to common data set. But if there is, I'll have something else prepared as well. So what I'm going to do is leave you now. If you have questions, you can put them in the comments on YouTube, because this will be posted there after it's been edited a little bit, zhuzhed up, and made to look better. And good luck on your aid crusade.